You are confident everywhere, except there. In every room you walk into, in every challenge you've built yourself to meet, in every version of yourself you've carefully constructed and successfully presented to the world, you are steady. You know who you are. Until desire enters the room, until someone looks at you that way, or until you want to look at someone that way, and something underneath all that competence contracts. Something goes small, something that has no name, but that you have been managing carefully for years. Performing confidence where the real thing was never built, mistaking the performance for the substance, wondering in the private dark why intimacy still feels like a place where you are fundamentally at risk of being found out. You aren't lacking confidence, you are divided against yourself. That is a different problem, and it has a different solution. The shadow is not your darkness. That is the misunderstanding that makes people afraid to look at it. The shadow is everything you decided, or were taught to decide, usually before you had the vocabulary to make that decision consciously, was unacceptable. Unacceptable to your family. Unacceptable to the people whose love you needed in order to survive. Unacceptable to the version of yourself you built in response to all of that. The shadow is not the worst of you. It is the disowned parts of you, which includes the worst, yes, but also the wildest, the most desiring, the most nakedly alive. It includes the part that wants without apology, the part that knows what it wants without running it through the committee of other people's potential reactions first, the part that can be fully present in a body without leaving through the ceiling. And here is the thing about the shadow and sexuality specifically. The erotic is one of the primary territories where the shadow gets stored, because what was most aggressively policed in your development, what got the most shame attached to it, what got the earliest and most insistent message of not that, never that, not like that, was almost certainly something in the realm of wanting. Wanting to be seen, wanting to take up space, wanting to touch or be touched, or simply to feel, without immediately converting the feeling into an acceptable narrative about who you are. The persona, the face you learn to wear, got built partly in response to what desire wasn't allowed to look like. And everything that didn't fit the persona got pushed down. It didn't disappear. It went underground. It went into the shadow, and it has been generating pressure ever since. Here is the mechanism that nobody names clearly enough. Shadow material doesn't stay buried. It compensates. When you split off a part of yourself, when you say consciously or not, that version of me is not safe to be, the libido doesn't stop moving toward what was split off. The life force doesn't accept the exile. It finds other routes. It surfaces as compulsion. It surfaces as the thing you do without quite meaning to. The reaction that's too big for the situation. The desire that arrives with a quality of shame already attached to it before you've even acted on it. It surfaces as the fantasy that you'd be embarrassed to explain to anyone who knows you, not because the fantasy is necessarily wrong, but because it's carrying something that was never allowed to simply be. Sexual shame is almost never about sex. It is about the split. It is about the part of you that wanted to be fully alive in a body and was told, in 100 explicit and implicit ways, that full aliveness was dangerous. What got labeled as the sexual feeling was often just, this is too much, you are too much, want less, take up less, feel less, and certainly feel it less visibly than this. The shame attached itself to the erotic because the erotic was the most visible evidence of aliveness. Kill the visibility of desire, and you have a person who appears manageable. A person who is not going to make anyone uncomfortable. A person who is performing confidence from behind a wall they themselves can no longer see. The compulsion, the shame spiral, the deflation that hits in the exact moment of potential intimacy, these are not character flaws. They are the shadow trying to get back in. From the outside, sexual confidence looks like ease. It looks like someone who is comfortable in their body, who can be direct about what they want, who doesn't seem to need the other person's approval before desire is allowed to exist. It looks like someone who stays present, someone who doesn't leave. From the inside, when the shadow hasn't been integrated, it feels like two people operating one body. There is the you that knows how to be competent, how to be charming, how to be appealing in every register except this one. Then there is the you that arrives uninvited, the one that needs too much, that goes numb without warning, that performs instead of feels, that watches the interaction from somewhere near the ceiling, that either disappears into the other person or becomes very suddenly, inexplicably cold. You've noticed this. You've probably blamed it on the other person. You've probably told yourself that if you could just find the right person, the split would close on its own. It won't. The split is not about them. It was there before them. It will be there after them. The specific behavioral pattern looks like this. You are most offended in the moments when intimacy is most available. When someone actually shows up, when the door actually opens, something in you performs or contracts or self-destructs with exquisite timing. Not because you don't want it, because some part of you learned at a foundational level that being fully seen in desire was the most vulnerable possible exposure. And vulnerability at that depth had a cost you were never willing to risk again. The shadow carries that learning. It has been protecting you. It has also been keeping you small. The integration of the shadow doesn't mean expressing everything in the shadow. That is the misreading that derails people. It means this: the parts of you that were split off and sent underground have been operating without your conscious participation for years. They've been running certain programs, the shutdown, the compulsion, the performance, without your consent, without your awareness, and certainly without your direction. Integration is not expression. Integration is re-ownership. It is the process of bringing those parts back into contact with the conscious self so that they are no longer autonomous, so that you are the one driving, not the complex. That is where the deeper sexual confidence lives, not in technique, not in the absence of vulnerability, not in having solved the self-consciousness problem or having found someone who makes you feel safe enough to finally relax. It lives in having metabolized enough of the shadow that you are no longer divided against yourself at the moment intimacy arrives. You are present because there is no other part of you staging a takeover. That is what people perceive as ease. That is what reads as confidence from the outside. It isn't the absence of want. It is the absence of the war about wanting. Now here is the work, not a practice, a confrontation, and it asks something real. Find where the split lives in the body, not conceptually, physically. Bring to mind a moment, recent or not, when desire was available and you contracted. When someone opened a door and something in you either performed your way through it or quietly closed. Don't analyze the memory. Drop below it. Where does the contraction live? Chest, throat, pelvis? The contraction is the shadow's address. It is not a malfunction. It is a location. Spend time there without trying to fix it. The body holds what the mind refused to process, and the body will give it back when you stop trying to make it give it back faster than it wants to. Let the disowned figure speak. This is active imagination used precisely. In that location in your body, there is a version of you, younger probably, more raw, certainly more unguarded, who wanted something that was not safe to want. Let that figure become visible to you, not as a pathology to correct, as a part of yourself that was left behind. Ask it what it wanted that it was told it couldn't have. Ask it what it learned about desire that made desire feel dangerous. The answer will not come as language at first. It will come as an image, or a posture, or a quality of feeling. Stay with that. The unconscious communicates in images before it communicates in arguments. and you are trying to make contact, not reach a conclusion. Reclaim the appetite without apology. This is the most confrontational step, and also the most specific. Somewhere in what the disowned figure carries, there is an appetite, a quality of wanting, a way of desiring, a version of aliveness in the body that you have been managing out of existence because it felt like too much, or too dark, or too needy, or simply too visible. The shadow integration work here is not to release it impulsively into the world. It is to stop treating it as evidence of something wrong with you, to stop the internal prosecution, to let it exist inside you as information rather than threat. The moment you stop fighting the want, you stop being divided. The moment you stop being divided, presence becomes possible. Presence is the whole game. What you will resist is this: the idea that your sexual confidence has anything to do with morality. You have organized much of your interior life, possibly without knowing it, around the premise that the shadow parts of you, the parts that want too much or too specifically or too darkly, are morally suspect. That if you had better values, or higher consciousness, or more spiritual refinement, the wanting would be cleaner, less complicated, less likely to get you in trouble with yourself. This is the persona talking. The persona learned to dress its self-management as virtue. It learned to call repression discipline. It learned to call the split between the acceptable self and the shadow self a kind of integrity, when in fact it was a kind of fear with good posture. The shadow is the record of what you were taught to be afraid to be. Treating it as a moral problem rather than a psychological one is how people spend decades in the same loop, managing the symptoms, never addressing the structure that generates them. The verdict is this: you are not too much. You are just in the wrong container. When integration is absent, sexuality exists in a specific kind of exile. It is always slightly somewhere else, slightly behind performance, slightly behind self-consciousness, slightly behind the thought that you should be doing this better, wanting this differently, being less afraid, or less needy, or less whatever it is you become in the exact moment when someone is actually paying attention. There is always a watcher. The watcher is the persona, making sure nothing too real comes through. When integration begins to take hold, and it is a process, not an event, the watcher loses its totalizing authority. Desire stops arriving preloaded with shame. You can want something, name it, feel it, act on it, without the internal prosecution that usually meets it before it even reaches the surface. The body stops being a problem to be managed and starts being the medium through which you actually exist. That is a different relationship to existence than most people have ever known. Not permanent freedom, not the abolition of self-consciousness, but the difference between being fundamentally at war with your own aliveness and being, however imperfectly, at home in it. The image for this is simple. A river that has been dammed doesn't disappear. It finds other channels, often destructive ones. Remove the dam and it doesn't flood. It finds its course. That is what the libido does when the shadow is integrated. It finds its course. It flows with the direction of an actual self rather than the pressure of an accumulated wound. The person who would have remained in exile, the wanting part, the alive part, the part that knows without apology what it needs, has been waiting for you to stop being ashamed of it. Not to celebrate it, not to express it without discernment, simply to stop prosecuting it for existing, to stop treating its presence as evidence that something in you failed to be properly formed. The whole structure of unconfidence in intimacy is built on that prosecution. Stop the prosecution, and the structure has nothing to stand on. What would it cost you to want fully without running it through the committee first? What would you do differently if desire were not already guilty before it arrived? The shadow is not waiting to destroy you, it is waiting to be you.